You came in yesterday and withdrew $300,000, the bank manager said, her confusion evident in the furrow between her eyebrows. Don't you remember? My hands started shaking before I even understood what she was telling me. And in that moment, standing in the marble lobby of First Pacific Bank with a woman who had worked with me for 17 years, I knew something had gone catastrophically wrong. I hadn't been to the bank yesterday. I hadn't withdrawn anything. I hadn't authorized anyone to touch my investment portfolio. So what did my daughter do? My name is Margaret Chen, yes. Actually Chen, not the character name I'm avoiding, and I'm 63 years old, which means I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. But the biggest one was believing that trust within a family was something that didn't need to be guarded. Let me start from the beginning. I've worked in finance for 41 years. I started as a teller, worked my way up through banking positions, and eventually became a wealth management advisor. I built a portfolio over decades through careful investing, smart decisions, and the kind of disciplined financial planning that most people don't have the patience for. By the time I was 55, I had accumulated approximately $2.8 million in liquid and investment assets. It was comfortable. It was secure. It was supposed to be my retirement, my legacy. The safety net I'd spent my entire adult life constructing. My daughter, Natasha, was 32 years old when she started stealing from me. I didn't know that's what was happening. I thought I was being a good mother when Natasha told me she needed help with a business venture. She said she and her boyfriend, Derek, had developed an innovative software platform for small business accounting. They had the technology, they had the market research. They had everything except the initial capital to launch properly. Mom, I wouldn't ask if I didn't believe in this, she said over coffee at my favorite place in downtown Portland. Derek's brilliant. This is going to be huge. We just need $200,000 to get through the first phase of development. $200,000. It was a significant amount, but it wasn't impossible for me. I could have written her a check. I could have helped my daughter and her boyfriend launch their business dream. But instead, I made what I thought was a wise financial decision. I'll introduce you to my investment advisor, I said. We can structure this properly. Set up a formal business entity, create a loan agreement with terms. Make sure everything's documented. Natasha's face shifted slightly. It was subtle, a tightening around her eyes, a barely perceptible tension in her jaw, but I saw it. I didn't understand it at the time, but I saw it. Actually, she said carefully, Derek wants to keep it more informal, between family. He is worried about getting investors involved because he has had bad experiences with people trying to steal his intellectual property. Red flag. I should have listened to that internal warning. But she was my daughter, and she was looking at me with an expression that suggested I was failing her by not immediately trusting her and her boyfriend implicitly. I'll think about it, I told her. What I didn't know was that thinking about it was the only thing stopping her from moving forward with a plan that had already been set in motion. 3 weeks later, Natasha called me in a panic. Derek had gotten an opportunity. An investor was interested in the software platform, but the investor wanted to move quickly. They needed to show financial commitment, proof that the business was serious. Could I help? Could I invest the $200,000 now? Of course, I said, because that's what you do when your daughter is asking for help with what seemed like a legitimate business opportunity. I'll have my advisor draft an investment agreement, Mom, Natasha said, her voice taking on that particular tone she used when she was disappointed in me. I really need this to be between us. Derek specifically said no lawyers, no advisors, no formal structures. He's paranoid about people stealing his ideas. I was 61 years old. I had spent for decades in the financial industry. I knew better. And yet, my daughter was asking me to ignore everything I'd learned about financial protection and trust her anyway. That was my mistake. Okay, I said, I'll write you a check. I wrote her a check for $200,000. She deposited it into an account she and Derek had opened. I asked for updates about the business. She gave me vague reports about development progress. I told myself everything was fine. I told myself that trusting my daughter was the right thing to do. I was wrong. 6 months later, I received a call from Natasha asking if I could invest another $150,000. There were unexpected costs, she explained. Server infrastructure was more expensive than anticipated. They needed to hire an additional developer. Could I help? I was beginning to feel uncomfortable. The lack of formal documentation bothered me. The vagueness of her updates bothered me. But when I suggested bringing in an accountant to review the books, Natasha became upset. You don't trust me, she said, her voice breaking. I'm your daughter, and you're treating me like a criminal. That accusation landed exactly where it was supposed to land, in the part of me that wanted to be a good mother, the part that wanted to believe in my child, the part that was afraid of being perceived as unsupportive or controlling. I gave her another $150,000. Over the next 18 months, I made for additional investments into their software company. Each time, there was a crisis. Each time, I was told the money was necessary each time. Natasha managed to make me feel guilty for questioning whether this was legitimate. In total, I gave them $747,000 of my own money. But that wasn't the part that destroyed me. That was just the part where I was being a poor financial decision maker and a worse mother. The part that actually constituted a crime was what came next. I was at work one morning when my bank called. Specifically, they called because there had been an unusual transaction on my investment account. A withdrawal of $300,000 had been processed. They were calling to confirm that I had authorized it. I hadn't. There must be some kind of mistake, I told the bank manager, whose name was Patricia and who had handled my accounts for 17 years. I didn't authorize any withdrawal. That's strange, Patricia said. Because the signature on the withdrawal request matches your signature perfectly. And the person who came in yesterday had valid identification with your name on it. My blood went cold. What identification? I asked. A driver's license, Patricia said. California driver's license. It looked legitimate. That's why we processed the withdrawal. I hung up and drove to the bank. When Patricia showed me the withdrawal form, I felt my stomach drop. The signature was mine, exactly mine, every loop and curve, every particular way I crossed my T's and dotted my I's. But it was also not mine. It was a forgery executed by someone who had studied my handwriting extensively. Have there been other transactions? I asked Patricia, my voice not quite steady. She pulled up my accounts and started scrolling. Her expression grew increasingly concerned. Ms. Chen, she said slowly, there have been 12 withdrawals over the past 4 months. $847,000, more than $100,000 more than I realized I'd given to Natasha voluntarily. Someone had been stealing from me on top of the money I'd already given. I knew it was Natasha before I even called her. I just knew when I confronted her that evening at her apartment. She didn't even try to deny it immediately. She sat on her overstuffed couch in the living room that I had helped her furnish, in the apartment that I had co-signed the lease for, and she looked at me with an expression that was almost defiant. It was Derek's idea, she said finally. Your girlfriend is stealing from me? He's not my girlfriend, she corrected. He's my boyfriend. And he wasn't stealing. He was investing. With forged signatures, I said, my voice rising with fake identification. Natasha stood up. Mom, you need to understand something. The $747,000 you gave us, that was never a real business. There is no software platform, there is no investor. Derek and I made it up. The words hit me like a physical blow. Not a real business, made it up. My daughter and her boyfriend had fabricated an entire company to extract $747,000 from me. And when I started asking questions, they escalated to actual fraud and forgery. What? I whispered. Derek said you were being controlling, Natasha continued, her voice taking on a defensive quality. He said you were using money as a way to manipulate me, to keep me dependent on you. He said the only way I could be truly free was if I took what I needed from you. I sat down on the couch because I wasn't sure my legs would hold me up anymore. Where is Derek? I asked. He's in Las Vegas, Natasha said. We moved some money there. We have about $400,000 of what we took from you. We were going to invest in an actual business once we got to Vegas. You stole $847,000 from me, I said slowly. You forged my signature. You created fake identification. You committed federal crimes. We didn't steal anything, Natasha said. And this was when I understood that I wasn't talking to my daughter anymore. I was talking to someone I didn't recognize. You always said you wanted to help me be independent. This is independence. This is fraud, I corrected. This is me taking control of my life, Natasha shouted. Derek showed me how to do it. He said mothers use money to control their daughters. He said the only way to break free was to take what we needed. I looked at my daughter, this woman who I had raised, who I had paid for private school for, who I had co-signed loans for, who I had tried so desperately to be a good mother to, and I realized that I didn't know her at all. I'm calling the police, I said. Natasha's face went pale. Mom, you can't do that, actually. I can, and I will. What happened next was the most painful part of this entire disaster. And that is saying something because I had already lost more than $800. And discovered my daughter was a criminal. I called the police. The FBI got involved because the forged documents and interstate wire fraud crossed federal lines. Natasha was arrested at her apartment. Derek was extradited from Las Vegas. Both of them were charged with identity theft, forgery, wire fraud, and conspiracy. But here's where it got complicated. Natasha was my daughter. She was my only child. Her father, my ex-husband, abandoned us when she was 3 years old. I had raised her alone. I had believed that If I worked hard enough and loved her enough and sacrificed enough, she would grow into a good person. I was wrong. The trial lasted for months. I had to sit in a courtroom and watch my daughter be prosecuted for crimes against me. I had to listen to Derek's attorney claim that he was just a boyfriend who had been manipulated by a woman who seduced him into her schemes. I had to hear Natasha's attorney argue that I had been a controlling mother who drove my daughter into desperation. And I had to sit there with the knowledge that the bank had already told me that the $847.00 was likely unrecoverable. Derek and Natasha had moved most of it out of accessible accounts. Some of it had already been spent. The FBI would do their best, but realistically, I should assume the money was gone. Both Natasha and Derek were convicted. Natasha received 4 years in federal prison. Derek received 6 years. The court ordered restitution. But the court also understood that criminals rarely have the means to pay back the full amounts they steal. I walked out of that courtroom with a conviction and a loss that was more than financial. I lost my daughter not because she died, but because the person who was her, the person who would look at me with such calculation and steal from me and lie to me and commit federal crimes against me, was someone I couldn't have a relationship with. I had to move forward. I had to file insurance claims. I had to work with a forensic accountant to document the theft for civil proceedings. I had to accept that my retirement was significantly compromised. I had planned to retire at 65. Now I would have to work until at least 70. What I didn't expect was how much harder this would be emotionally than financially. People asked me if I regretted pressing charges, if I wished I'd handled it differently, if I thought I could reconcile with my daughter. The answer to all of those questions was no, because what Natasha and Derek did wasn't just theft. It was a calculated, premeditated crime designed to exploit the trust between a mother and daughter. It was manipulation, deception, and criminal activity wrapped in a package of independence and freedom. I saw Natasha twice during her incarceration. The first time, she was remorseful. She cried and apologized and said Derek had manipulated her. The second time, she was angry. She said I had ruined her life by pressing charges. She said I was a controlling mother who couldn't accept that my daughter wanted to live differently. I haven't visited her since. The financial impact was real and lasting. I had to work 7 more years than I planned. I had to watch my retirement savings diminish instead of grow. I had to make difficult decisions about my future because of choices my daughter made. But the emotional impact was worse. I had to confront the possibility that I had failed as a mother. That somewhere along the way, I had raised someone capable of looking me in the eye and committing serious crimes against me. That the trust I had given so freely was a liability, not a virtue. 4 years later, Natasha was released from prison. She didn't contact me. I didn't contact her. As far as I know, she moved to Arizona and is trying to rebuild her life separate from me. I'm 70 now. I'm still working because I have to. My retirement will be smaller than I planned because of the theft. I'll likely have to work another few years beyond that. My daughter is a felon. My relationship with her will never be repaired. What I learned from this experience is that sometimes loving someone isn't enough. Sometimes your child grows into someone you don't recognize. Sometimes the price of that discovery is measured in hundreds of thousands of dollars and years of your life. I tell this story not because I'm looking for sympathy. I am telling it because there are other parents out there right now who are being slowly stolen from by their adult children. There are mothers and fathers who are ignoring red flags because they want to believe in their children. There are families being torn apart by manipulation and fraud. My advice: document everything, require formal agreements, use lawyers and accountants. Don't let love make you stupid, because I was in the financial industry for 41 years. And I made every mistake anyway because I was too focused on being a good mother to be a cautious woman. The irony is that the caution wouldn't have made me a bad mother. The documentation and the boundaries and the professional relationships would have protected both of us. Instead, I got a daughter in prison and a retirement delayed indefinitely. That's what unconditional trust costs when it's exploited by someone you love. Some days I wonder, what would have happened if I'd said no the first time? If I'd insisted on proper business documentation? If I'd listened to my financial instincts instead of my maternal impulses? But mostly I just try to move forward with the life I have left, knowing that I did everything I could with the person I thought my daughter was, and that sometimes that simply isn't enough.